Okay, but first will be Hoya, or shall I talk?
No, you go on.
Oh, all right, fine. Well, welcome back for everyone. I first met Adi in 1992. I will say a few personal things actually here. I first met Adi in 1992 in Utrecht. And we sat down for beer, and he introduced himself and talked for a moment, and he said, "I'm from Romania, I bet you do not know where Romania is." And he won that bet, because all I knew was that Romania was in Eastern Europe. And so I said, "You should invite me to come so that I know." And he said, I bet you would not come. And he lost that bet. So, can you hear me here?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I
know that you told me that you were in Vietnam and nothing wrong can happen.
Oh, yes,
that's right. In Vietnam, yeah? In that moment.
Exactly. And in fact, I went to the library, my library, and I got a travel book on Romania before I came in. They said, you should not go because there's no food and there is no one will be friendly. And I said I did not believe that, so I came. But I got some hard fruit bars before I came because I thought, well, maybe there would be no food. And when Irina Tanasiu came to get me, they put me in the room in Cluj for Rose 93. I pulled out a bar, I bit on it, and I broke off half of my tooth. And so I spent the rest of Rose 93 with only half a tooth. Of course, there was plenty of food. The food was very expensive. I took a bunch of students out to eat, and I bought them a big meal. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I might point the mic in a different direction. You're losing the connection. Oh my. Well, I'll bring it closer, but can you? Okay. Well, in order to be this close, you have to see my face in a very distorted way. But that's all right. So I was telling Adi before that I ended up buying food for many students, and on my way back through Frankfurt, a cup of coffee cost me what the entire meal for everyone cost. I have many other stories that I have fond memories of, and many other people here, but I think you want me to talk not so much about yesterday, but about today. And so I would like to talk about today. I would like to talk a little bit about phones, because that's what I'm on now. I work at a company that makes Android phones. Among other things, we make Android phones, we make telecommunication devices for airplanes, and sure you will hear many things about those talks from many other people. Well, I would like to talk about today, and my challenge to you to come. It does not work now. Oh heck. What do you suggest? Okay. So my challenge to the people who are listening here is to come back in 20 years and talk about tomorrow, talk about the future, because I don't know what the future is going to bring. So I can talk a little bit about phones. Obviously, if you give me 15 minutes, I cannot tell you all about Android, but I have a presentation online that I gave to the National Center for Atmospheric Research here in Colorado, and it's an hour presentation, and I will give Adi the URL, and he can provide it to anyone who's interested. Even that, I can't really tell everybody everything there is to know in an hour about Android. But one of the things I can say is that, let me see here, that Android, many of you know as an operating system for telephones, and here is my telephone today. It's an Android phone. It's a Nexus 4, which is made by Google. And then this is my father's telephone, right here. And that's a telephone that can do almost nothing. I mean, my telephone is my alarm clock. My telephone is my calendar. My telephone is the thing that I use to talk to Adi. I can exchange email. My father never even heard of email. But it's more than that. Android is very interesting. Yes, just so. But Android is more than an operating system for telephones. Android is Google's flagship embedded operating system. For example, it runs on this tablet. It also runs on my Kindle. So it's something that people are now starting to put in all sorts of devices. It's a very interesting operating system, and at the heart of it is Linux, which oh, well, I have not had that problem yet. Not yet. But perhaps there's someone who is deleting us because we're reading things on Kindles, and they're causing trouble for our transmissions. I don't know. But the things that, for me, many of the things that are interesting about Android are not just that it's an embedded operating system, but that it's an embedded Linux. It's a Linux distro. At the heart of it, you can find a fairly conventional Linux kernel, Linux device drivers. Normally, people don't log in and get a shell prompt and type ls, but you can certainly do that. I do that all the time. Only people who are crazy do that, like me. And the reason that it's Linux, the reason that Google chose to build its embedded operating system around Linux is because it has good device drivers, it has good security, it performs well, and of course it's free. And it got all those things from Unix. Everything comes to us through Unix. It's a little bit of a funny Linux, but not terribly funny. It's just another distro like Red Hat or Ubuntu. But it has, in addition to the Linux core and the basic Linux utilities, it has an entire virtual operating system built around Linux that's written in Java. The virtual operating system is an object-oriented operating system. It's inherited from another operating system called BIOS. I don't know if you have ever worked with BIOS. I never had, but it's pretty interesting. And then above that is another layer that presents interfaces to the programmer, And most people who program on Android devices like tablets or Kindles or phones write to that layer. They write applications, and they write applications in Java. I sort of like that it's in Java and not in some special language, the way that iOS has. For iOS, you have to use Objective-C, which is a whole other language. There is a large set of tools that go with Android. However, it's important to remember that way down at the bottom, it's all still Linux. And then up above that layer is, of course, the stuff that we use. I'm using it right now to talk to you. I looked back at the talk that I went to look back at the talk that I had given to NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and as I was cleaning up my presentations, I deleted it. So I went to the NCAR website, which is of course hosted on a Unix machine, and it had videos, and so I thought I can just watch the video of myself. And I tried, and I could not get the video to play. You know, this conference is not the only place that ever has communications problems. And so I tried to get it to play on my Linux box on a couple of different browsers, and it would not work. And I tried to get it to play on my girlfriend's Windows box on a couple of browsers, and it did not play. And so I called up the person who was the administrator, and he gave me the URL for the MP4 that was my video, because I needed to watch myself to see what I should say. And then he said, oh, but you have to find an MP4 player, and I don't know where to find one of those. I said, all right. So I clicked on the URL in my Android phone, and it just started to play. So it's a pretty good little computer. The amount of code is really quite large, but it's all free. You can download the entire source for the Android operating system. And you can build it. I can build it in perhaps 20 minutes on my build servers, but I have even built a full Android Gingerbread release on an Atom processor with almost no memory and almost no disk. It's just slower. When I say there's a lot of code that's free, it's really quite a lot. It's about for Gingerbread, it's about 26 million lines of code. That's millions. That's big. That's as big a project as I've ever worked on. And the newer versions are even larger. But you can go in and modify it, and people do. There are many distros of Android, just the same way there were many distros of Unix. And so the common distro is from Google, but there's a version called CyanogenMod that's an independent version, and it has a somewhat different look and feel. And I have loaded CyanogenMod on, for example, a book reader, a Barnes & Noble Nook. I bought a Nook color, and I put CyanogenMod on it, and then although the Barnes & Noble wanted me to buy this in order to read their books, the first thing I did was to put a Kindle app and read my Kindle books on it, which is a little bit odd. So I'm not certain what anybody would like to hear about Android. I'm happy to answer questions.
There are few around here who are interested.
There are fewer?
No, there are some around interested.
There are some around. Well, if there's anyone who, including you, who has particular questions that you can ask that I might be able to say I don't know about, or even answer, I could take a question now, because I have other things to say, but
No question.
No questions. Oh, well. Yes, this reminds me of the Polytechnica. Irina Atanasiou had me come to the Polytechnica and give a talk. The first time I was in Romania, and I stood up and I gave some prepared talk, or started to, and at the break it became clear that the students were not very interested in that, and what they really wanted to know was they wanted to know how to make a living doing software. So I started to think about that and tell them. I changed my topic right there. And so I said, well, the first lesson is that you can't sit around and wait for people. So what you need to do is to go out and sell software that you make. And I said, who has a piece of software that you can sell me? And of course, no one would raise a hand even then. It's just like now. No one would say anything. And so I said, well look, if you have even a simple piece of software and you sell it to me for the price of a cup of coffee, I will give you the cup of coffee. I will have a piece of software that's worth more to me than the price of the cup of coffee, and you will have a cup of coffee that you did not have, and you can go sell your software again. And that was lesson number one. And so Jorge Bligor, who was sitting at the back, raised his hand, because he's not shy, and said, I have a bubble sort in assembly language that I can sell you. And I said, all right, this is your second lesson. If you're going to sell software, you must sell software that someone wants. I do not want that. So, and after that, someone ran up to me after the talk and told me, thank you very much. And that was Sebastian Taralunga. And when I came back with Evi Nemeth to Rose 96, Sebastian was already a manager at the largest internet provider in Romania. So sometimes people do things. That sort of leads me to another topic, which is that the people who are there are looking at me and looking at you, Adi, and some of them are thinking, oh, they are here because they did something in the past. And that's wrong. We're here because you're doing something now. This conference wasn't brought to you by space aliens. You know, it didn't come down and sit down and just happen. It really, you created it. You created it along with other people. But you all sat down and said, we will have a conference, and you did it. And it wasn't just old people like you. It was also, people like Eugene Siliste, is that his name? Who helped set up the audio, and Marina, and these are people who don't think, oh, I have to wait for somebody to do something for me and then I will follow along. The way that things happen is the way that Rose 93 happened and that Usenix in Romania happened. It's that people did it, and people said let's make things happen. And so I have a challenge for everybody who is still listening and who can follow my English, which is, when you get ready to leave this conference, go out and do something. Don't just go to conferences and listen. People like Eugene should be doing. Hi, Eugene. and are. And so, it could be anything you want. You could go with your friends and download the Android operating system and build it and learn something about it. You could go out for glasses of Suica and to eat slanina with all the people who are sitting around you, and promise one another that before the end of the evening you will all teach the others something that you didn't know. You could walk out and start planning another conference of your own. You could, I'm certain that users groups there, like Guru, just as they do here, always need speakers. So you could go to Adi and say, I would like to give a talk. Or you could, if his group doesn't suit you, you could start your own group. That's what he did, right? But a few years ago, I had my boss, Steve Ash, my manager, Steve Ash, called me in and said, we have a problem. You need to take vacation right away. I had saved up too much vacation. He said, you must take a month's vacation. And I have to explain, perhaps, that in America, even very senior programmers don't get a month's vacation. They get 2 weeks in a year. And so I sent a note to Adi and said, Adi, I would like to come over and do some work for you. I can pay my way. My company is already paying my salary. I would like maybe if you could find me a place to sleep and some food, but mostly I would like to work. And he said, good, there's a lot of work to do. So I came over, I did some work. And if you're looking for things to do and can't think of your own things, you should go to Adi and ask him, and he will say, good, there's a lot of work to do.
How many books there were when you looked after Knut's volumes? When you came, the story was heavy.
I'm sorry?
The story with Evi and Irina about the books for Romania. The huge amount of books.
Oh yes, I remember that. So when I came over with Evi Nemeth is the godmother of Unix system administration. She invented system administration, really. All of the system administrators around the world are her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and I brought her over because Adi had looked for speakers, and Evi said, yes, I'll go. So she said, oh, I have a lot of books and you could take them over. So I said, okay, and I got, I went to the warehouse where she had her books stored, and there were several cases of books, and so somehow I managed to bring all those books as luggage. They weighed a ton, and got them over, and then gave them away to anybody who wanted them. They included the Mythical Man Month. I can't remember what else, but the reason that I remember the Mythical Man Month is because I just got a note from the publisher who wanted me to advertise a giveaway of the Mythical Man Month, and I said, could you send them to Romania? And she said, not in time, but I will still work on it and see if we could get you some more.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right.
I hope next year you come here.
Well,
we organize something. You know, we cannot plan all these things. It maybe will happen in 20 years or 15 years. I don't know this. So time is not under our control.
no. But I think you need to say it differently. You need to say, maybe we will have a conference next year. I bet you will not come.
Yeah, that's a better way to say it.
Yes.
Okay, can you see us? Because Horia will
I can.
come. You cannot. Horia will come next. He will make a small intervention. Yeah? Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks. It was very good. Now we heard you well, and there were some interesting things.
All right.
Because you try to keep us in the style that I prefer to communicate with the others. I'm not used to communicate. I have not went out from my office since 14 years ago or something.
Yeah, well, that's why I have to come to Romania. You have not yet come here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was only in Cuba, you remember?
Yes, I remember. So, okay. Now, Horia?
Hoya will come after you, yeah? I
Okay.
will try to connect with him, and then with Liviu Stode from Rutgers University.
All right. So, should I stay on this or just hang up?
We hang up, and then we hang
Okay.
up, and then we see you may stay there. Maybe if you have. Thank you very much. Can you hear? Yeah.